Ethan had been on the alien trade world of Velthara for just under 3 months, and he already knew he didn't fit in. Humans were rare here. Most of the residents were tall, elegant Velthari with silver-toned skin, long eyes, and voices that could cut through the noise of the crowded markets. Ethan wasn't tall, didn't have silver skin, and his voice was rough compared to theirs. He worked in a dusty repair bay near the cargo docks, fixing whatever came through, broken shuttle panels, faulty navigation systems, or old mining equipment. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough for food, rent, and a little extra. More importantly, it kept him out of trouble. Trouble had a way of finding humans in alien cities, and Ethan wanted none of it. That evening, the sun was low, painting, the streets in gold and violet. Ethan decided to take the long way home after work, through the quiet back alleys of the city's old district. The crowds were gone, replaced by the faint hum of street lamps and the sound of wind slipping between stone buildings. He heard voices, ahead. Sharp, impatient voices, then a softer one, firm, but carrying a trace of fear. Turning the corner, Ethan saw her. A young alien woman stood with her back against the wall, 2 armored guards blocking her path. Their weapons were small, curved rods that crackled faintly with energy. "You shouldn't be here without escort," one of the guards said. "I am capable of deciding where I go," she replied, her tone steady. Ethan didn't know much about Velthari customs, but the sight of 2 armed men cornering someone, anyone, made his chest tighten. "Is there a problem?" Ethan asked, stepping forward before he could think better of it. Both guards turned. Their eyes swept over him in open disdain. One of them barked, "Human, walk away! This matter does not concern you." "Looks like it does now," Ethan said. The guard took a step toward him, but Ethan's hands were already at his tool belt. He didn't draw a weapon, he didn't have one, but he did pull out a small, compact scanner that he used for repairing short-circuited ship panels. "Funny thing about those rods," Ethan said, pointing at the crackling weapons. "If the power cell gets a surge at the right frequency, it locks up for hours." Before the guards could react, Ethan switched on the scanner and aimed it at the nearest weapon. A sharp buzz filled the air. The guard looked down in alarm as his rod sputtered, then went dead. "What did you—" the other guard began, but the young woman stepped forward quickly. "Enough," she said, her voice commanding in a way that surprised Ethan. "Leave us." The guards hesitated, glancing between her and Ethan, but then backed away, muttering something under their breath. As they disappeared around the corner, Ethan let out a slow breath. "Are you okay?" She looked at him for a long moment before smiling faintly. "I am unharmed. Thank you. Human." "Ethan," he said, offering his name. "Lyra," she replied. They walked together toward the main street. She moved gracefully, each step deliberate, but her eyes flickered with curiosity. "You are not from here," she said, though it was more a statement than a question. "No." "Just a mechanic passing through," Ethan said. "What about you? You always wander into trouble, or was tonight special?" Her lips curved slightly. "Special?" As they reached a busier area, she slowed. "You saved me," she said softly, as if testing the words. Most would have turned away. "Guess I'm not most," Ethan replied with a shrug. "Besides, I didn't like their tone." They reached the edge of the market district, and Ethan assumed she would leave. Instead, she followed him all the way to the small repair bay. She looked around at the cluttered tools, the half-repaired engine parts, the faint smell of oil. "You work here?" she asked. "Yeah." "Not much, but it pays the bills." She picked up a small gear from the workbench, turning it over in her fingers. "You fix things others throw away," she said. "That's one way to put it," Ethan replied. For the next hour, she stayed and watched him work. She asked questions about every tool, every part, even about Earth. He told her about rainstorms, forests, and the way the ocean smelled. She laughed at his clumsy attempts to explain coffee. When the evening deepened into night, she stood to leave. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "City's big," Ethan said, though a part of him hoped she would. "But sure, why not?" Her smile was small but real. "Until then, Ethan." She slipped out into the dark street, her silver hair catching the light for a moment before she was gone. Ethan stood there for a while, staring at the empty doorway. He didn't know who she really was, but he had the feeling she wasn't just some stranger he met in an alley, and deep down, he knew this was the start of something he couldn't quite explain. The next morning, Ethan told himself that the girl, Lyra, probably wouldn't come back. She seemed like someone who lived in a different world from his. She was too graceful, too confident, too, well, important looking. But just before midday, while he was deep in the guts of a faulty cargo drone, the repair bay door slid open. There she was, wearing a light cloak with the hood pulled low over her silver hair. "Morning," she said, stepping inside like she owned the place. Ethan looked up from the drone. "You're back." "Did you think I wouldn't be?" she asked with a faint smile. "Honestly." "Yeah," he admitted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Most people don't hang around a dusty workshop for fun." "I am not most people," she said, wandering toward the workbench. She picked up a small tool and turned it over, clearly not knowing what it did. "Teach me how to fix something." "You?" Ethan raised a brow. "You've probably never used a wrench in your life." "Then it is time to learn," she replied. Against his better judgment, he showed her how to tighten the fittings on a fuel regulator. Her hands were delicate, and she was clumsy at first, but her focus was sharp. She asked questions about every part, about why things broke and how humans learned to fix them. Ethan realized she wasn't just curious, she was hungry to know. They worked side by side for hours, and it felt strange to him, this quiet companionship. Most customers dropped. Things often left, but Lyra stayed, leaning close to see what he was doing, sometimes making him laugh with her questions. When the job was done, she sat on the edge of the workbench, legs swinging slightly. "On my world," she said, "most people do not repair. What is broken? They replace it." "Wasteful," Ethan replied. "Yes," she agreed softly, "but it is our way." He wanted to ask more, but she glanced toward the door. "I should go before someone sees me." "Why? You hiding from someone?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Just not ready to answer questions." Over the next several days, she kept coming back. Sometimes she brought food from the market, spiced bread, sweet fruit, or small dishes Ethan couldn't name. Sometimes she simply sat nearby, reading from a small silver tablet while he worked. She told him little about herself, but bits and pieces slipped through. A childhood spent in the royal gardens, lessons in diplomacy, and constant eyes on her every move. One evening, after the repair bay closed, she convinced him to take a walk outside the city. The air was cooler there, filled with the scent of flowering trees. They found a quiet hill that overlooked the glowing skyline. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked suddenly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Sometimes. But I don't think I'd fit there anymore. Been away too long." She studied him for a moment. "You are different from the Velthari I know. You do not speak to impress. You do not hide your thoughts." "Never saw the point," he said with a shrug. Her lips curved slightly. "I like that." It was late when they returned to the city. As they neared the old district, a figure stepped out from the shadows, one of the armored guards from the first night, his gaze locked on Lyra. "Princess," he said sharply. Ethan froze. Lyra's jaw tightened. "You will not address me here," she said. The guard ignored her, speaking into a small comm device. "I've found her." Within moments, two more guards appeared. One moved toward Ethan, but Lyra stepped between them. "He is with me," she said firmly. The lead guard spoke into his comm again, his eyes never leaving Ethan. "Prepare transport. The Queen will want to know where her daughter has been." Ethan felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. "Princess," the word repeated in his mind. He'd been spending his days with the daughter of the alien queen. As more guards arrived, Lyra turned to him, her eyes urgent. "Do not follow me tonight. Please." Before he could reply, they escorted her away, disappearing into the glow of the city streets. Ethan stood alone, the night suddenly colder. Back at his small apartment, he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every moment, her curiosity, her laughter, her careful avoidance of certain topics. He'd suspected she came from somewhere important, but royalty? The next day, whispers filled the market. The missing princess had been found. She had been gone for days, away from the palace without official escort. No one knew where she had been. The queen herself had issued the order for her return. Ethan kept his head down and worked, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He didn't know if he would see her again, or if he even should. Being near her could mean trouble, yet deep inside, he knew one thing. If she walked through his door again, he wouldn't turn her away. 3 days passed without a single sign of Lyra. For Ethan, each day felt longer than the last. He tried to lose himself in his work, replacing faulty ship panels, cleaning engine filters, fixing broken cargo scanners. But his mind kept wandering. He wondered if she was all right. He wondered if the Queen's guards had punished her. On the 4th day, just as he finished repairing a shuttle's coolant system, the door to his repair bay slid open. 2 tall, armored figures stepped inside. Their armor was dark silver, polished to a mirror shine. The visors on their helmets reflected the light, hiding their faces. "Ethan, human engineer," one of them said in a deep voice. Ethan set down his tools slowly. "That's me." "You are summoned to the royal palace," the guard continued. "By order of Her Majesty Queen Velara of the Velthari." Ethan felt a weight drop into his stomach. "What for?" "You will know soon," the other guard said. Refusing didn't feel like an option. He locked up the repair bay and followed them. The streets grew grander as they neared the palace. Market stalls gave way to tall towers and smooth white roads, lined with glowing plants. The palace itself was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It rose like a crystal mountain, its walls shimmering with embedded gemstones. The entrance was guarded by rows of soldiers standing so still they might have been statues. Inside, the air was cool and carried a faint scent of flowers. The walls were lined with towering columns, each carved with flowing patterns that seemed to move if you stared too long. The guards led him through wide halls until they reached massive double doors. They opened with a deep rumble, revealing a chamber so vast it felt like a small city. At the far end sat the alien queen. She was tall and commanding, her silver hair woven with delicate strands of gold. Her robe was layered silk in shades of deep blue, and her crown shimmered with soft light. Beside her, standing straight but with her hands clasped, was Lyra. Ethan's heart jumped. She was here. She was safe. But she didn't meet his eyes. The queen's gaze locked on him. Her voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. "Where have you been?" she asked, not to him, but to her daughter. The chamber was so silent that Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. Lyra turned her head, her eyes calm but unflinching. She lifted a hand and pointed directly at Ethan. With him, a wave of whispers rippled through the court. The queen's expression didn't change, but her gaze shifted to Ethan. For a long, heavy moment, she studied him like a rare animal she couldn't decide to keep or release. The queen raised one hand, and the guards lining the chamber fell silent. "Leave us," she commanded. The courtiers and soldiers bowed and exited until only the Queen, Lyra, Ethan, and 2 silent guards remained. Her attention returned to him. "You know who she is now," she said. "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "Figured it out a little late." "Why did you not tell anyone where she was?" "Because she didn't want me to," Ethan replied simply, "and I figured she had her reasons." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "You interfered with my guards the night you met her. I stepped in when they cornered her." Ethan said, "I didn't hurt them. I just gave them a reason to back off." "You risked angering the crown," she said. "Maybe," Ethan said with a shrug, "but she didn't seem like she wanted to be dragged off that night." I respected that. There was a long pause. The Queen glanced at Lyra, who stood with her chin lifted, silent but unwavering. Finally, the Queen spoke again. "Your kind is unpredictable, dangerous at times. You are not bound by our customs or our rules. Why should I trust you with my daughter?" Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking for your trust," he said. "But I've never lied to her, and I've never used her for anything. I'm just a mechanic. We talk, we walk, we share food. That's all." The Queen tilted her head, studying him. "Perhaps, but the bond between you two, it is not nothing." Lyra finally spoke. "Mother, he is my friend, the only one who does not treat me like a title. That is why I go to him." Something unreadable passed over the Queen's face. "Friendship can be dangerous when it leads to defiance." "And isolation can be worse," Lyra replied softly. For a moment, mother and daughter stared at each other, the air between them thick with unspoken words. The Queen rose from her throne, her long robe trailing behind her as she stepped down toward them. She stopped just a few feet from Ethan. "If you are to continue being in her presence," she said, "you will face a trial. It is the only way I will permit this." "Trial?" Ethan asked. "A journey," she said. "Dangerous. It will test your intent, your courage, and your loyalty. Should you fail, you will leave this world at once." Ethan exhaled slowly. "And if I succeed?" The Queen's gaze softened just slightly. "Then you may remain, and she may choose to see you as she wishes." Ethan looked at Lyra. Her expression was a mix of worry and trust. He gave a faint smile. "All right," he said. "I'll take your trial." The Queen stepped back toward her throne. "It begins tomorrow." As the guards moved to escort him out, Lyra caught his hand for the briefest moment, her voice low. "Be careful," she whispered. Ethan didn't answer, but he gave her a nod. Whatever this trial was, he had no idea what awaited him. But if it meant protecting her freedom and maybe keeping their bond alive, he wasn't going to walk away. The morning of the trial came faster than Ethan expected. 2 royal guards arrived at his small apartment before sunrise. They brought him to the palace gates where a small transport skimmer waited. The Queen stood there, her robe sweeping the ground, her presence commanding as ever. Beside her was Lyra, dressed in travel gear, light armor, a utility belt, and a hood to shield her face from the sun. "You will escort my daughter to the Temple of Storms," the Queen said. "It lies beyond the shadow plains and through the glass canyons. The path is dangerous. Only those who understand trust survive it." Ethan frowned. "Temple of Storms sounds friendly." Lyra's lips twitched in the faintest smile, but she stayed silent. The Queen continued. "You are forbidden from calling for outside help. The trial is yours to face together. If you return without her, you fail. If you abandon her, you fail. If you harm her, you will not leave this planet alive." Ethan nodded once. "Understood." The transport skimmer carried them away from the city, across open plains that shimmered with heat. For the first hour, Neither spoke. The trial hung over them like a shadow. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "If you leave now, my mother will send you away, but you'll be safe." "Yeah, but you won't," Ethan said. "And I'm not. The kind of guy who walks away from someone who needs him." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment. Then she turned back to the horizon. The skimmer stopped at the edge of the shadow plains. The ground here was dark, almost black, and jagged stone formations jutted up like broken teeth. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of minerals and distant rain. "We go on foot from here," Lyra said. They walked for hours, weaving between towering stone pillars. Strange, insect-like creatures watched them from above, their eyes glinting. Ethan kept his hand near his tool pouch, just in case. By midday, the sky began to darken. Storm clouds rolled in fast, turning the plains into a maze of shadows. Lightning cracked in the distance. "That's why it's called the Temple of Storms," Ethan muttered. The first challenge came when they reached a narrow pass between two cliffs. The path was blocked by a creature unlike anything Ethan had seen before, a massive reptilian beast with thick armor plating and a head crowned with sharp horns. It stood its ground, growling low. "Velthari Storm Guardian," Lyra whispered. "They attack if they sense fear." "Well, that's reassuring," Ethan said dryly. The beast lowered its head and stomped forward. Ethan quickly scanned the terrain. To the left, a narrow ledge ran along the cliff wall. It was risky, but it might get them around the creature. "Follow me," Ethan said. Lyra hesitated but trusted him, stepping onto the ledge behind him. The stone was slick from rain, and the drop below was dizzying. Halfway across the storm, Guardian charged at the cliff, shaking the ground. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm, keeping her from falling. "Don't look down," he said. "Just move." After tense minutes, they reached the other side. The beast roared but didn't follow. Retreating into the shadows, they pressed on until nightfall, making camp under an overhang. Ethan started a small fire using a heat coil from his pouch. Lyra sat close, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. "You could have fought it," she said quietly. "Most would have tried to kill it." "And risk us both getting torn apart?" "No thanks," Ethan replied. "Sometimes the smart move is not fighting at all." She smiled faintly. "You think differently from my people?" The next morning, they entered the glass canyons. The walls here were smooth and shining like crystal, and they reflected light in confusing patterns. Echoes bounced everywhere, making it impossible to tell where sounds came from. Halfway through, a sudden rock slide trapped them between two high walls. The ground shook, and from the dust emerged three figures in scavenger armor. Their weapons were crude but deadly enough. "Hand over your packs," one of them growled. Ethan stepped slightly in front of Lyra. "Not happening," the lead scavenger smirked. "You're outnumbered." "Yeah, but you're overconfident," Ethan said. In one swift move, he pulled a flash emitter from his pouch and triggered it. A burst of blinding light filled the canyon. And in the confusion, he grabbed Lyra's hand and ran. They sprinted through the twisting paths until the shouts faded behind them. When they finally stopped, Lyra was breathing hard but laughing. "You are full of surprises," she said. "And I'm just getting started," Ethan replied. By late afternoon, the towering spires of the Temple of Storms came into view, rising from the plains like jagged lightning bolts frozen in stone. But as they drew closer, the wind picked up, and rain began to lash against them. The trial wasn't over yet. Something in Lyra's eyes told Ethan the hardest part still lay ahead. The Temple of Storms loomed ahead, its black spires twisting into the clouds like frozen lightning. The air crackled with energy, and each gust of wind carried the sharp scent of ozone. Ethan could feel the storm's power in his bones. They approached. The massive gates, carved with ancient Velthari symbols, Lyra stepped forward and placed her palm against a glowing mark. The gates shuddered, then slowly opened, revealing a vast hall lit only by flashes of lightning that filtered through narrow openings in the ceiling. "Once we enter," Lyra said, her voice steady but quiet, "we must face the final trial. It will not be about strength alone. It will test the bond between us." "Good thing we've been through a few tests already," Ethan replied. Inside, the floor was made of polished black stone that reflected their movements. The hall led to a circular chamber with walls covered in shifting patterns of light. In the center stood a tall crystal pillar, sparking faintly. As they stepped closer, the air around them thickened, and a voice, not from any single direction, spoke in a deep, echoing tone. "Two have come to prove their trust. One leads, one follows. If either falters, both are lost." Lyra glanced at Ethan. "I know this trial. We must cross the storm bridge." "Storm bridge," Ethan repeated. The patterns on the walls shifted, revealing a narrow bridge made of light stretching over a deep chasm. Arcs of electricity danced across it, and the drop below seemed endless. "You go first," Lyra said. "I will follow." "No," Ethan shook his head. "If this thing tests trust, then we do it together." The moment they stepped onto the bridge, the surface flickered beneath their feet. A sudden blast of wind nearly knocked Ethan sideways, but Lyra's hand shot out. Gripping his arm tightly, lightning forked across the bridge, striking between them. The voice echoed again. "Will you protect her, even if it means your fall?" Without hesitation, Ethan stepped in front of Lyra, shielding her from the next surge. The electricity struck his side, sending a sharp jolt through him. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. Halfway across, the bridge split into two paths, one glowing bright, the other dim and unstable. The voice spoke again. "Choose your path. The strong shine, the weak fade." "Bright one's a trap," Ethan muttered. "Too easy?" Lyra hesitated but nodded. They took the dim path, which shook under their weight. More lightning struck around them, and sections of the bridge began to vanish behind them. At the final stretch, the gap between the bridge and the far side was too wide to step across. The only way was to jump. "You go first," Ethan said firmly. "And leave you?" Lyra shook her head. "I'll make it. Trust me." She stared at him for a moment, then leapt. Her landing was shaky, but she caught the edge and pulled herself up. Ethan ran, the bridge vanishing under his feet, and jumped just as the last section faded. Lyra grabbed his wrist and pulled him to safety. The moment they landed, the bridge dissolved completely, and the chasm below vanished, revealing solid ground. The voice spoke one last time. "Trust proven. Bond unbroken." The crystal pillar in the center of the chamber flared with light, then shattered into harmless fragments. The storm outside quieted instantly, and the gates behind them opened to the plains beyond. They stepped outside, the air now calm. The sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light over the land. "You did it," Lyra said softly. "We did it," Ethan corrected. Their journey back to the city took 2 days, but it felt lighter than the trip out. They faced no more dangers, only the quiet company of each other. On the final night before they reached the palace, they camped beneath the stars. Lyra looked at him across the small fire. "My mother will ask what happened in the temple. I will tell her the truth, that you protected me, that you chose the harder path, and that you never left my side. And if she still doesn't like—" "Me?" Ethan asked. Lyra smiled faintly. "Then she will have to accept that it is not her choice alone." The city gates came into view on the morning of the 3rd day. Sunlight caught on the crystal towers, making them gleam against the clear sky. For Ethan, the sight brought a mix of relief and tension. The trial was over, but the Queen's judgment still waited ahead. As they passed through the main streets, people stopped to stare. Whispers spread quickly. Princess Lyra had returned from the Temple of Storms, and with her was the human stranger who had accompanied her. Some looked curious, others suspicious. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the path toward the palace. When they reached the great doors, royal guards in polished silver armor stepped forward. Their captain bowed to Lyra, then motioned for Ethan to follow. Inside, the throne room looked even grander than before. Sunlight streamed through high windows, making the polished floors shine. The queen sat on her throne, her posture tall and commanding. Her gaze was sharp as she watched them approach. Lyra bowed slightly, then stepped aside so Ethan stood in full view. The queen's voice carried across the hall. "You have returned from the temple. Tell me, what did you find there?" Lyra met her mother's eyes. "We faced the Storm Guardian, the Glass Canyon Scavengers, and the Storm Bridge. Ethan chose the harder path, shielded me from harm, and never abandoned me." The trial's voice said our bond was proven. A murmur spread through the court. The queen's gaze shifted to Ethan. "And you? What say you of this journey?" Ethan took a breath. "It was dangerous, but I'd do it again if it meant making. Sure, she got back safe. I'm not here to challenge your rule or cause trouble. I'm here because Lyra is my friend, and she deserves the freedom to choose who she spends her time with." The queen studied him for a long moment. Her expression gave nothing away. Then she rose from her throne and walked down the steps until she stood directly before him. "Few outsiders survive the Temple of Storms," she said. "Fewer still earn the voice's approval. You have done both. For that, you have my respect, though not my complete trust." Ethan nodded. "Fair enough. However," she continued, "you have earned the right to remain in my city, and if my daughter wishes to see you, I will not forbid it." Lyra's shoulders relaxed, though her expression stayed calm. The queen turned to her. "You have always sought your own path. Perhaps now I understand why." For a moment there was a flicker of warmth in her tone. Then she faced Ethan again. "Know this. If you ever betray her trust, no trial will save you." "Understood," Ethan said. With that, the queen returned to her throne. "You are dismissed. Go, both of you. The court has other matters to attend." As they left the Teuk Hall, the tension in the air eased. Once they were outside the palace, Lyra turned to him with a small smile. "You handled that better than I expected." "I didn't get struck by lightning in the throne room, so I'll call it a win," Ethan said. She laughed quietly. "Now that my mother has allowed you to stay, there is much of my world I can show you." "Does this involve fewer giant creatures trying to crush us?" Ethan asked. "No promises," she said with a teasing glint in her eyes. Over the next week, Lyra kept her word. She took Ethan to places most outsiders never saw. The royal gardens, where flowers glowed faintly in the dark, the floating markets above the river, where traders from distant worlds gathered, and the ancient library hidden beneath the palace, filled with books and scrolls older than the city itself. Everywhere they went, people noticed them, but Lyra seemed unconcerned. She walked beside Ethan without hesitation, and over time, the stares grew less hostile. One evening, they returned to the quiet hill outside the city where they had once talked beneath the stars. The sky was clear, and the twin moons cast silver light over the land. "When we first met," Lyra said softly, "I did not think you would risk so much for me." "Guess I didn't think I would either," Ethan admitted. "But here we are," she looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." "Wasn't an option," Ethan said. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the moons rise higher. In the palace, the queen received reports about her daughters' activities. She read each one carefully but found no reason to interfere. Perhaps, she thought, the human had proven himself more than once. For now, the matter was settled. And so, in a city where humans were rare and trust even rarer, Ethan and Lyra walked, side by side, not as royal and subject, not as outsider and native, but as two people who had faced storms together and come out stronger.